And we're live, Andrew, if you want to kick it off.
Sure. So, and just to quickly clarify kind of the format here. So Chris has everyone on mute except for myself, him, and Julie. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you want. If you want to ask questions, I think we'll kind of go through our kind of spiel here. If you feel strongly about interjecting with a question, please do. Otherwise, we'll open it up to questions, and you can just unmute yourself and ask away, or you can utilize the chat option, which we'll monitor and keep an eye on, which is off to your right there. If you want to plug in a question there, we'll try to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, so, and don't, with the chat, feel free not to hold your questions. So go ahead and just like whatever question pops in your head, we'll get to when we get to the Q&A.
Yeah. So, first things first, I just hope that everyone is as excited as I am about Game 6 of the Warriors-Raptors game tonight. For you Warriors fans out there, I hope there's at least a few. But
I'm more excited about the 13-0 Women's World Cup victory the other day.
Wow.
Over Thailand.
Ouch. But seriously, we're really excited about this next chapter here for Select Counsel. Julie and Chris, who I'll let introduce themselves in a minute, and myself have been working on this for many months, and we have some exciting plans to share, both today, but also as part of an ongoing sort of series of town halls. We'll try to do these pretty regularly, maybe once a month, so that we can sort of keep you apprised of what we've been working on, what's in the near term, solicit feedback, and sort of make this a bit of a collaborative effort via these town halls.
Right.
So I thought I'd just kick things off just to provide sort of some context in terms of some history on Select Counsel, and sort of ultimately what kind of led us up to this point. So I think over the past couple of years, we've built up a great platform. It is a really outstanding group of lawyers with pretty unbelievable subject matter expertise across the board, and across the country, and across the world. We've had some really good events, and I know many of you have had a chance to meet each other and get to know each other, and many of you are routinely working together. The discussion board, while perhaps a little bit noisy and not always relevant to each of your respective practices on an individual level, I think has been a pretty huge success from a more sort of holistic, higher level view. I think it seems to be the case that for most of you, it's sort of a go-to resource when you have a need, or there's something outside your wheelhouse, or you don't have someone in your immediate network. And by and large, the members, I think, have really responded to almost every need that has come up. And there's probably been, well over 1,000 over the last couple of years. So I think it's a really strong indicator. And then, I know anecdotally that a ton of business has been exchanged throughout the network. I know many of you have derived a lot of new clients and matters since joining Select Counsel. I also know that others have not yet had as much luck, which was, one of the real drivers for doing this deal. I came to understand that, while the network on many levels has been a success and really, I think, a value add, it has so much more potential, which I think can be realized if Select Counsel is not just sort of a standalone independent network, but really part of a larger community that includes various stakeholders, not just outside counsel, but certainly clients and inside counsel, as well as other stakeholders. So when Chris and I started talking, and I learned more about in the house, and it just became very clear, I think, to both of us that these respective networks needed to be integrated in some way, and that could, that the in-house network could really benefit from our depth of subject matter expertise, which is not readily available to in-house lawyers in certainly in smaller legal departments. And on the flip side, generally, the Select Counsel lawyers are really the types of lawyers in terms of expertise and sort of size and efficiency and quality that the in-house clients are looking for. So it occurred to us that a lot of value could be derived from both networks if we were able to create a real community between the two counterparts. And we're not envisioning just sort of kind of a referral list that, we're handing over to the in-the-house lawyers and saying, here's a great list of lawyers, you should consider using them. We're talking about building a much deeper sort of relationship over time between the two groups. So we'll talk a bit more about how we plan to do that and what that all means over the course of this meeting and future ones. But I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork and provide some context. And I think with that, I'll hand it over to Chris and Julie to introduce themselves.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to do a quick screen share here so we did prepare a PowerPoint, which we'll get into. But I also want to just respond in a good way to Andrew's comments, because at In the House, we've gone through a similar journey where we've realized that the in-house lawyers in our network can benefit a lot from reaching out to others and having more interactivity with other stakeholders, as Andrew puts it. So I'll allow Julie to introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself to everybody.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm so delighted at the attendance that and some of the communications that we've gotten on LinkedIn and through email. So thank you, everybody. And I just want to say hello. You're going to get a slide that gives you a little bit about my background. Obviously, it's not my first rodeo. I've been practicing law and doing startup work for a long time. But I want to talk about as much substance as we can during our time together. And I agree that Andrew and Chris, and the initial notion of creating some synergies between two platforms and two groups of stakeholders was the genesis of this. And then I'm going to tell you about how I came to know Chris and Neocognetics. Neocognetics is an incubator, and we have a legal tech vertical. And over time, we started to talk because through In the House and various other organizations, we went to the same law school. I wonder if that had something to do with it. I'm not sure. But at any rate, we started to talk about the stakeholders and, in fact, the changing landscape of legal practice and the impact of technology on changing that landscape and making the stakeholders more interesting and different from traditional forms. So we got together and decided that we would together work on Neocognetics and this whole legal vertical and establish an ecosystem, much like Andrew and Chris were talking about originally, only it's bigger than just two companies and two in the house, two segments. And so that's how we evolved to this place. And during our presentation, you'll see at least one more company, and there are more. And frankly, we're getting ideas from you about other stakeholders, and we're learning about how your practice has been impacted and your area of specialty has been impacted by, changing legal practice styles and dynamics and technology. Some of it's good. Efficiencies have emerged, and some of it is interesting because those efficiencies affect the standard practice styles and the way that people go for help. That help is in the form of the work that we do as lawyers. And so as we move forward, Chris and I have been talking about making sure that however this group works together and how we evolve, and Andrew's exactly right, we want to have a series of these town halls because this is a collaborative effort. Some of the information that informs our view of what's happening comes from you, much. And we have some ideas about how to make sure that this group is ahead of the curve and those changes inure to the benefit of the practitioners here. We have a dog in the fight. We like technology, but we want to make sure those efficiencies don't drive the business down for in-house people and smaller practitioners we want a merit-based system. And that's what we're about.
Absolutely. Yes. So, and the only thing I'd add to what Julie said is that not only do we want you to be ahead of the curve, but we want you to be delivering what general counsel are asking for based on our daily interactions with them. Because once you allow them to open a vein, they speak very loudly and clearly about what they're looking for from innovative law firms. And we'll get into a bit of that as we go through the PowerPoint. So let me just step through it. So Julie, if you'd like to, you want to introduce yourself and just go through a little bit of your background?
I'm Julie Goggin. I have had a career that has mostly been in-house, and the last few years has been working with startups. I'm an East Coast lawyer who, once I moved in-house, really worked for Fortune companies for the most part. I did transactions. I was an M&A lawyer for Rockwell. I was, I guess, their M&A lawyer. I did international work for another Fortune company. And then I moved to Silicon Valley as a trailing spouse. And I recreated myself as a startup lawyer, but that's just the beginning, because it turns out that that sort of work suited me. It was, everybody pick up a broom. It didn't have the same boxes. And I note with interest that many of the people at Select Counsel are smaller practitioners. And I think you know what I mean. There's a business aspect to what you do. And there's not a whole lot of, I don't think there's a whole lot of layers and administrative support. So tools and efficiency matter to your bottom line. You have to think about growing your business. And it turned out, once I went out to Silicon Valley, that I liked it so much, I ended up doing some other C-suite work and running a small company or two. And we came back to the East Coast, and it's been a dream of mine to put together an incubator that worked in this vertical in legal tech. And I met Chris, and his specialty actually is in-the-house practitioners. His network is huge. It's alarming how huge it is. I can't believe that these guys, Andrew and Chris, know so many people, have such good relationships, and keep track of everybody. So that's a little daunting from my perspective. I hope to do it. But the good news for all of us, I think, is that in addition to his background, which he'll tell you about as an AmLaw 100 IP guy, he is by inclination and by training a technology person. And so those two things together, plus what I do, which is a little bit strategic, formed a really nice basis for the legal tech vertical of our incubator.
Yeah, and we have other partners in the fintech and medtech space as well who focus on that, although we all try to help each other with our own sectors. So a little bit about me. I know some of you. I think there's at least one former law partner in the group that I saw, so I do know some of you. But I'm the founder of In the House, and I'm also the new COO of Select Counsel as of just a couple weeks ago, I guess. And my background is in IP litigation. So I've been doing IP litigation. I still occasionally take on an IP litigation for over 20 years. I have done some landmark cases, including getting one of the largest damages awards in a false advertising case, and some other things that I did. And a lot of patent litigation during the patent litigation, dearly departed patent litigation boom. So as Julie mentioned, I'm a former AmLaw 100 IP partner. I've also been a solo practitioner. So I've been from the very big to the very small firms. And I've been a fractional GC and a couple times a full-time GC to startup companies. My first GC role was way back in 1999, just prior to the dot-com collapse. So we had some issues there with losing our funding, but we did okay, and we ended up having a good, we were able to sell the company to someone it's now part of a larger company. So that's been good. So I've been in part of the startup world for a very long time. I started out as an aerospace engineer. I also did software design. So that's the kind of work I did right out of school, which combined both aerospace engineering and software. And I've sort of stayed in that space, and involved in that space. And I've also founded several startups, and my particular passions outside of technology are I really love networking. I think it's a great model for how to build business. And I'm really interested in career development, particularly for lawyers at small firms and for in-house counsel, because those are career tracks that haven't traditionally been well understood, but I think they're extremely important, especially for the future. And then I guess Andrew doesn't really need an introduction because you all know him, and he did a little intro himself. Let's see. So let me just advance the slide. Oh, I guess this is me again, Julie.
Right.
So I'll cover in the house. So I'll try to do this pretty quickly. One thing that is maybe not on the slides, but you guys should know, is I regularly interact with GCs and other in-house counsel. I have their ear, I listen to them, and I hear very loud and clear what they want from firms. So part of the value I think I personally can bring to your community is to help you understand what GCs are asking for. And that's at both large legal departments with thousands of lawyers and small legal departments of, sometimes even just a solo GC. And they're both really important. They have some similarities and some differences, but everything I say here is informed by that. So over the past 6 years, we've built in the house into a community of over 50,000 in-house counsel altogether, if you include all our social media properties and our mailing list. And I interact with those folks all the time. We do have pretty good name recognition and credibility with GCs and other in-house counsel. They realize that we've been trying to serve their interests and have been serving their interests for several years. So it's very common for me to go to some conference and someone has heard of In the House and says, oh, you're that guy. Well, yeah. So it's really been gratifying to hear the sort of the knowledge of our work has really spread pretty far and wide, including even in Europe and in some cases Asia and South America. What we provided in the house is really a transformative platform for legal innovators. So even though our branding is very much about in-house counsel, I truly think of our community as really legal innovators. And I've thought a lot about these issues, and Julie and I have conversations almost daily about this. I think there's really three important stakeholders in our community. The first is the in-house counsel community, which you guys know and understand to a large degree. The second really is innovative outside counsel. I add that adjective for a reason. I'm interested in working with those people that are willing to innovate. I use innovation very broadly, by the way, as do many GCs. For example, not only technology, but I include diversity in innovation. And GCs very commonly say that they wish that law firms would provide more gender diversity, more ethnic diversity to their teams on their matters. So that's really important to GCs, and I think as a community, the outside counsel community, have not responded quickly enough. And I think that's one really important thing that GCs want to see. For an example, that's sort of people don't always put that in innovation category, but I tend to do that.
But something else that you put into the category, which I think fits nicely right here, is to make sure that the audience understands that CRISP also means innovative administrative processes, billing matters, approaches. So it's a thoughtful kind of, and complex kind of notion of innovation, but it's apt. It's apt because that's what we do. This practice is, and the changes that it's undergoing, it's complicated. It's not, linear.
Absolutely. And it also aligns, if you align along innovation lines, it's a way of sort of moving your chair. You might think of the chair as across the table from the in-house lawyers. But when you talk technology, you can move onto the same side of the table. And I think that's really important because in-house counsel really want technology. They want their outside lawyers to have technology. They want to adapt innovative technologies to their in-house practice. And so the third category is legal technologists. These are people that are part of the legal community, and maybe have law degrees, but most importantly are delivering the legal technology that both in-house counsel and outside counsel will use. And similarly to Andrew, in my journey, in-house started out as sort of just in-house counsel by ourselves, but we realized we really do need partners. We need to partner with other innovators, regardless of which of these three areas they come from or where their day job resides. So we use a variety of tools, thought leadership programs, information exchange through meetings such as this, in-person meetings, online chat, etc., to build bridges between these three stakeholders. And I think that's really important. That's an image that I use a lot because I think that once you build those bridges, you can sort of build referrals on those bridges, on the strength of those bridges. But it's important to go through that process of bridge building first. So here, let me go on to the next slide so I don't spend too much time on this. I think I mentioned this. We have over 50,000 members across our entire community. We reach the vast majority of Fortune 500 legal departments and many much smaller legal departments. We have over 9,000 general counsel from companies of all sizes. So we have quite an extensive network. We're still a bit smaller than the ACC, but we're growing more quickly. So, and the Association of Corporate Counsel is a great organization, and we've even kind of partnered with them at times on a few events. But we ultimately believe we will be the larger community, and we're more tech forward than they are for a variety of reasons. We also reach across basically every industry in our membership. So we have a pie chart there, and we'll go into all the sectors. Julie's telling me to slow down.
Yeah, no, and I actually want you to spend a little bit of time here because we have a community of Select Counsel members that we don't know yet. But some of the things that you're interested in, I'm sure you know as small business owners or in addition to practitioners, is that you are interested in building your business in one or many of these sectors, and that decision, and sometimes the financial decision making that goes along with choosing outside counsel and legal technology differs not just by the size of department, but by industry. So, for example, and actually there are probably regional differences too. Those are the kinds of pieces of information that we will take our good base, curate with your input, and then have very specific data points for you and very specific funds of information from which you can launch your marketing programs and you can network through. And that's why, we'll get to this in a second, we have, in addition to expanding the in-the-house kind of network, we've added other kinds of legal tech companies in our sector, because sometimes decision making about whether or not to hire you or use your firm is made from the financial or the administrative level, and sometimes it's made as part of an annual planning function, and not on the basis of just a budget, and the GC has a lot of flexibility. It really does. There's some complexity there. It depends. And so the reason I wanted Chris to show you this is because this is an example of the kinds of information that the fund of information that he has. He gets this information through the mechanisms that he talked about, right. Networking, but he also does surveys, and he does, and the response rate from the in-the-house members, which is probably a good indicator of the survivability of this organization over ACCA.
ACCA will survive, but they're different. They're a bar association.
That's exactly there, and this seems timely. So the reason why I'm bringing this up now is to show you, but also to ask you to say, look, for this to work well, if your response rate starts to look like the response rate when questions are asked for these folks, you will have a library of information that will suit you and let you, grow your practices and your businesses, and know each other and the other stakeholders, not just lawyer stakeholders, better.
Absolutely. So I'm glad Julie slowed me down. I'm eager to get to your questions. So I may be flying through some of this material, and I apologize for that. So we also cater to legal departments of all sizes, as the smaller pie chart shows. So we have a very large number of members from smaller legal departments, and those are not necessarily small companies, by the way. Some pretty sizable hedge funds, for example, have one in-house lawyer, which sometimes boggles my mind. But and that really varies by sector. Some sectors like especially with that have heavy workers' comp issues, they sometimes have thousands of in-house lawyers. Right. So and other types of issues like that are heavy regulatory issues, but others don't. So it's very interesting. And I do want to pause here for a second, because Julie touches on two things, which are metrics and relationships. And one of our goals in the house is to really own the data on, yes, the slides will be available after the presentation, someone asked, on the chat window. So yes. We'll be building up the biggest repository of data on the in-house career path and what it means and what these people are looking for. And that will include surveys. And we are planning an annual survey where Select Counsel will be the sponsor of that survey, which is great. And these are typically, companies have paid us many thousands of dollars, up to $40,000 to do these types of surveys. So the information is very valuable that we glean. So there's a lot of endorsements here from various GCs at companies large and small who really appreciate what we're doing. And I won't read them, but you'll see the slides, which we'll send around after. I think the appreciation comes from the fact that, believe it or not, even though they may get wined and dined a lot, GCs are actually, I've found over the years, a very underserved community. People don't engage with them enough in their professional capacity, in what they actually do day to day, even though when they have business to hand out, people are eager to meet up with them. But they actually are more inclined to engage with people on a higher level and really develop more meaningful relationships than just, billable hour type of relationships. So that's one of the key lessons we've gleaned over the years with talking to GCs. Now, finally, you guys are getting sick of me. I'm going to pass it back to Julie, who's going to tell you a little bit about the new parent company, Neocognetics, and a little bit about some of the high-level things we're working on. And by the way, we may, if we haven't mentioned it, I think Andrew did, this is going to be one of a series of meetings. So you guys will get to as many questions as we can today, but we're going to dive deep in future meetings as well. So just so you know that.
This slide is part of the deck that'll be available, so I'll cover it on a high level. And I've already started to talk to you about who we are and why we do what we do. It is because who we are is we're an incubator that we think we're a little bit novel, because we kind of do like professional services from a tech perspective. And the reason that we do that is what I really want to talk about, and I really want you to start to think about. We do that because we think that after every innovative period, efficiencies emerge that drive wholesale change, economic change, and our profession, legal profession, will change as a result of some of the innovation that is occurring in our space that is sort of universal. For example, artificial intelligence. I'm sure that a lot of you guys know, or maybe you don't, about a move toward having NDAs vetted as a first pass by artificial intelligence-driven software tools. And that is an example of a piece of technology that's a time saver if you're a busy in-house lawyer, and an opportunity if you are a Select Counsel member now to get ahead of that curve and not be the person who loses the business as a result of that, but grows your business as a result of that. That's actually a hard thing, and it's an interesting thing. And what these and just like I'm going to show my age here, but when I was a very very young, like baby lawyer, I was 5. Westlaw and LexisNexis were battling it out for the space that turned out to be the digital research world. And it is true that has been a standard now, and people go to law school now. That's what they learn how to do. And there's whole classes in law schools who don't use books the way that I learned actually how to do. And that said, the practice was enhanced ultimately. And this group, but the legal community was initially not receptive to this. And it's because the traditional model needed to change along with the technology. So the billable hours, where you had associates and junior people like going through books and taking the time, was very lucrative for firms. So the law firms actually changed their models, and they accommodated the technology. And these changes for artificial intelligence and some of the software tools are more profound, and they're more holistic. And I want to go back to the example of that piece of technology, the tool that vets NDAs. some of the advertising that some of the software companies, and there are battles just like there were for position in the technology companies. We'll talk about that in a minute. But some of the software companies they make the point that they have these test results. They use seasoned GCs and in-house lawyers and outside counsel people who do this by, very effectively. They're the fastest and the most effective, and they spot risk, and, they have all of these algorithms that do that. And the tools work better than the best lawyers. It's like John Henry, right? And boy, that really shows age.
I remember that. Yeah. We learned that.
Yeah.
Race against the steam engine. Yeah.
And so because it's such an important trend, and I just gave you one tool. There are a bunches of tools. I don't know if you guys have seen the legal research tools that use artificial intelligence. And some are in beta, but some are commercially available. They're really, really very interesting. And like learning a new language, it takes some effort. Now they'll get easier and they'll get more user friendly, but you can see that they add efficiency to the LexisNexis Westlaw models that are already, have gotten more efficient. But there's a ton of business and technology changes that inform the practice of law, and that's what I wanted to say about Neocognetics. We are creating an ecosystem of mutually beneficial communities that understand these changes and try to make sure that our communities are best served by staying ahead of the trends and being part of the voice that informs which of the technologies are going to be used, and the rest should be history with your help.
Yeah, and one quick note there is I often contrast the financial services industry with the legal services industry because for years, financial services was dominated by the sell side. When I graduated college, everyone wanted to be a broker, And as you all know, the buy side has completely taken over that entire industry in a transformative way. And they've done so successfully by aggressively adopting technology and aggressively changing business practices. I think something very similar, different, but similar is happening in legal services. And so the buy side, namely the GCs, are really taking over this industry. And the sooner we all realize that, the better off we're going to be. So I think we need to understand the critical role that GCs are playing now.
So, Chris, I'm just keeping an eye on the time.
Yep.
And want to make sure we move into.
Why don't we handle CXO now really quickly? Julie?
Yeah, I just want to contradict Chris, who just said GCs are really important. Actually, the buy side is important, and what I want you to understand, and this is my perspective, which differs from Chris and it differs from Andrew, although I believe we're on the same page now. The buy side is important, but it's what we're understanding now and what other data from other sources is showing is that buy side, that decision-making point, it is informed by other disciplines. So sometimes it is HR, sometimes it is for the labor employment lawyers amongst us, sometimes it is the CFO and differs by industry. That's the kind of information that we have and that it will be of use for you, to you. We have another company that we're curating. It's called CXO Now. It started off as GC Now, and we provide fractional general counsel services. But as we started to expand that notion, we got chief financial officer type people involved, marketing people involved, labor and employment people involved. Because remember, Neocognetics incubates startup companies, and often they have different needs. So we have a stable of people who do this kind of work. Those are the kinds of relationships I believe, and I think now understand, will help inform those buying decisions in the future. So CXO Now is really, really important to us, and it's important that we involve you as much as we can in this effort, because the people that you know who are not needing legal services now but are starting a company, and those are the people who might need a marketer now. Suppose you can make a really good referral there, you establish relationships, and then they come back and they're looking for their first in-house counsel, they're looking for their first funding transaction or an exit transaction, they manage with fractional services, you are right there. So that's the kind of ecosystem we're trying to enhance and expand. Okay,
Right.
a little bit over a minute.
That's okay. So, and I think that's super important. The C-suite execs, especially at the smaller companies, are great referral partners if you can groom them. And they're too busy to, once they find a law firm they like, they're too busy to shop around. So you want to get in there early with the fractionals before they grow and hire full-time C-suite execs. And sometimes they'll have 2 C-suite execs that are full-time, but they'll need the other ones to be part-time. So I just want to very quickly, what we're ultimately going for in terms of what you got, where you guys are coming from, is, this is sort of the bilateral referral paradigm that was mine for years. I developed good relationships with other firms and hoped to send them business in the hopes they'd send it back. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're really looking to expand this to a new paradigm where, you've got your law firms, you've got the other law firms in the Select Counsel network. Andrew's done an amazing job building up that referral platform. But we really want to add those 3 new elements into our referral paradigm. Get those in-house counsel directly engaged and becoming referral partners over time. Get the C-suite execs involved, especially the fractional ones coming from CXO Now. And then the legal tech firms, you don't always think of them, but they can be great referral partners. What GCs want to hear is that firms are open to technology and they're tech forward and they're adapting technology to better serve their clients. So if you can get in good with a tech firm that will tell potential clients, oh, have you thought about so-and-so firm? They're really embracing technology and trying to deliver better client value and better client service. Those are sort of atypical, but I think very powerful referral partners. And they're very business-minded, extremely business-minded, the legal tech. So I'll just cover this one quickly, Julie. So you already know Select Counsel, so I don't want to spend too much time on what Andrew's already done, but I've been super impressed by Andrew since I first met him, probably a couple of years ago now. And he created I think, a game changer by saying, let's bring together really high quality boutiques, many of them founded by former AmLaw 100 partners, and then collectivize in some sense, our marketing and our referral network so that these are sort of the first people we go to. I think of it as similar to the personal board of directors concept that many of you have heard about. And we encourage continued growth, obviously, on that type of activity, because I think that's always going to be very important to your practices. But we also want to move forward into the future and help provide additional support for you guys as we go forward with this partnership. Obviously, business development through the referral platform.
And other things.
Yeah, and other things.
Teach.
Exactly. Thought leadership, we think this is super important for lawyers, especially at smaller firms, to sort of be able to get out in front and provide thought leadership to GCs and other in-house counsel, because the goal is to become the go-to person in particular niche areas that in-house counsel care about. We think legal technology is very important. Hiring trends can be very important, both to build up your own practices as you need additional talent, but also, very importantly, helping in-house counsel find their next role. Because believe me, that's something they never forget. If you can do that, they'll remember you 30, 40 years later if they practice that long. And then help build up a more sustainable way of building long-term client relationships. And ultimately, the quality of your practice, which is extremely important. And at least to me, there's 2 key elements. How client-driven is it, and how efficient is it? And if those are your 2 main metrics you're focusing on, the business will come. Let's talk just quickly about first steps moving forward. One of the really important thought leadership platforms are our working groups, and we're looking to really immediately solicit interest from you all about what additional working groups we should create. We have a very active cybersecurity working group. It's actually co-chaired by the former editor-in-chief of Corporate Counsel magazine, who's a near legendary journalist, I'd say. So he's done a great job with that group. But also blockchain is another example. Everyone knows they need to know about it. If you can be differentiated as the expert in that area, that's super important. And clients need someone to go to when they have blockchain questions. And another non-substantive but super important area is talking about the attorney-client relationship. How can we do better? What can we do to better serve you? And now I think we're really getting to the part of the program where we want to solicit your interaction And we want to hear from you now or on the chat group or offline about what you're looking for from this partnership and what else we can do for you guys. I mentioned this at the beginning, but we would really like to hear from you. You can unmute. You've been muted because with this many people on the line, it gets very noisy. But you guys can unmute yourself and, chime in with questions or pop questions into the chat group. And do you, Julie, we have one last slide. Do you want to get into the sort of some of the partnership plans we have in the near term?
Well, I think, and guys, start curating and putting forth your questions. But I do want to say this. I think that you should know that some of the work already in these slides and some of those lists of important items have come from you guys already. And we've heard from some of our European brethren about, a desire for more face-to-face interaction and a desire to figure out the issues that they see and talk to the American practitioners about those. We're hoping to hear that from Asia too. And because of that, and we've had a really good response very quickly, we are forming a schedule with your input. We intend to have some face-to-face meetings, and we intend to change the platform and the offerings from in the house as a function of what you say. And it takes time, but I think that you will reap immediate benefits just from taking the existing structure and participating in that.
Absolutely. And this slide now, we've already previewed some of this in our emails to you, but I think we should get to the questions now so you can see the items on the slide. I do want to mention the steering committee, though, before we close out the slide deck. Think of the steering committee, what I think of it as is, remember those bridges among the three key stakeholders? I think of the joint steering committee between Select Counsel and in the House as sort of the living embodiment of that bridge building. So we're going to have technology vendors that are there that are represented. We're going to have law firm partners from Select Counsel as well as GCs and others from in the House. And we're really going to work together, I think, exemplifying the importance of building those bridges and building those strong relationships. I won't lie, if you join the steering committee, we're going to expect you to do some work and really put in some time and effort building these relationships and helping us to set the agenda for the future. But I think it will be time well spent through relationship building as well as helping us to chart the future course and expansion of both Select Counsel and in the House.
And there's something else that you should know. There will always be, Andrew, as Chris mentioned, Andrew's done a terrific job, I think, by any measure of getting a group of superior practitioners together. And we intend to grow this group, and we continue to grow in the House. But that said, we will be selective. We're going to be selective. So we're going to use some of, and Andrew's teaching us, and he will continue to participate, and he'll be part of us. He's teaching us some of the very smart and effective, turns out effective, ways that he has. Limited membership sounds kind of mean-spirited, but he's made sure that the level of practice is something that you guys can rely on when you call and network with each other. And so he's helping us with that.
He's been selective.
Yes.
So let's...
I wouldn't mind just talking. Feel free to cut me off, anyone, if you want to jump on the question. I wouldn't mind talking about this slide.
Sorry. My timing was awful. I just shut down the slide deck. So here we go.
Yeah, just items sort of 2 down and trying to frame this a little bit in the context of business development and client development, because I know there's many of you who are pretty interested in that, as you should be. And so...
Here, let me get to the slide. Sorry. There we go.
So, these things, the discussion boards, the working groups, the thought leadership opportunities, I want to sort of frame this a little bit as under the business development umbrella and just make this really clear, because this is one of the things that I'm really excited about for this partnership in particular within the house, because, I've been working hard to try to bring in referrals, bring in leads through marketing efforts to Select Counsel over the years. Part of that was social media. A lot of that was the CLEs, which worked, but it was challenging to market Select Counsel sort of in a vacuum, just out to the client universe. And so what we have now is sort of a partner in this, a vast client community that, are going to, that Chris is really going to be helping them to understand and appreciate, what Select Counsel is, what they have to offer, the type of expertise and capabilities that we have. So now we have sort of this engaged audience, and we want to leverage that audience to allow to create a platform that allows you to be to do effective business development. And the way that I think of business development is having two critical components. One is networking, the other is thought leadership. So the networking is sort of obvious. There's going to be in-person networking events. There's going to be virtual networking events with this sort of community that kind of should know at a high level who we are and what we offer. So they're engaged and they're listening. So that's just far higher impact networking than if you were just networking by yourself, going to events and conferences and what like. The other, on the thought leadership side, this is where I just think there's so much opportunity. Thought leadership is so important to client development, but I think it's almost impossible to do as sort of a solo practice. I mean, you can do your blog and you can try to speak at panels, but that's tough to do again in this vacuum. But what we want to do is create this platform where you can actually have really meaningful thought leadership opportunities, whether that's, and just to give a couple of examples, the discussion board, which you all maybe love and hate. Soon we're going to be developing tools so that in-the-house lawyers can start to access that discussion board and start putting forth questions, inquiries, needs to you all. And that is a phenomenal opportunity for you to take the time to respond thoughtfully to that question. It will, appear to everybody in the discussion board. And that's just sort of high impact thought leadership that's only going to take you a few minutes. Leading webinars on new issues, and we really encourage everyone to think of something in their practice that could really be helpful or new or is breaking or is really practical. And it could be a 10-minute webinar, it could be a 15-minute webinar. We'll help market it to the in-house community so that they, are aware. And then you get on the horn and you speak about it for a little bit. That's great, high impact thought leadership. So it's things like that. Just to be put a little bit more meat on this and just kind of take it down to a more practical level so that you guys can sort of see some of the ideas we have floating around and how that ties into business development.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The other benefit is expanding beyond the single discussion board and have niche discussion boards on particular interest topics, which will also align well with the working groups. And I think of the working groups, I must think of as there's multiple touch points, right? There's the in-person networking events, which we'll talk about in much greater detail in future town halls. They'll be like less frequent because it's hard to get people out of their office and to an event, but they're important. Then a little more frequent are the working groups, which are more like a monthly basis for depending on your interests and your niche. And then there's the regular online discussion boards, which is almost between the other forms of meetings. There could be continuing that discussion online between meetings. So I think it's really important in this day and age to have those multiple touch points, and that those touch points be organized around what in-house counsel care about.
That's exactly right. I mean, I want to add two things to what you guys said. One is, as you see, right, we're talking about the discussion boards, and Andrew says that you may love or hate, who knows, but there's in order to achieve the goals that these guys are talking about, enhanced functionality, right? That's a technology play that Chris is working on as we speak. And the other thing that he said, and Andrew, to dovetail on Andrew's comment about it being hard for a solo practitioner to be a high impact thought leader. And so there's strength in this group, but the credibility of this group will come from this organization and the fact that we do things in a cohesive way. So it may be that, I already said labor and employment, I don't want to say IP, I don't want to say transactions, let's just say commercial contracts. So it may be that is an area that after we get some information that we decide we're going to focus on in a quarter. But whatever the decisions are about the organization and how we're going to go after things, we're going to use our mass and our reputations to make sure that this is a credible group and it emerges as the thought leader. That's how you do that. Okay, I've got a question here.
Yes, we have a question, and I'm going to stop the share because I want to see some faces if we can. So I'm going to stop the share. And a lot of you do not have your video enabled, but we have about 20 people that do. So
okay, well, let's answer the question. A little more detail about the steering committee and the expectations of volunteers. That is Chris.
That's probably me as, I guess, the new COO. So here's what we expect. We expect to, first of all, so the steering committee will be sort of the highest level role, and this is from Nicole. Thanks, Nicole. And it's sort of the highest level structure for the partnership. So we'll be really charting the future direction of the organization. What are the most important activities? I think it's all about prioritization.
It's a strategic job.
Right.
It operates like a board of directors.
Exactly.
And it sets so the mission already exists. The all over, the overall strategic plan exists, and then but that's really an endpoint. And really what the steering committee does is it takes that and chunks it down to a 3-year plan, a 1-year plan, and then we get with Chris and his staff some operational and some practical mechanisms that effectuate what the steering committee outlines.
Exactly, and that will include, to get a little into nuts and bolts, then we'll move on to any other questions we have. It gets into nuts and bolts too. So what are the most productive working groups? Make sure that the working groups we're building are the ones the in-house lawyers want. And also, if we do a survey, I'd actually be expecting input directly from the steering committee members on, are we asking the right questions? Let's make sure that the annual survey gets down to the information we really need about how to tailor our practices and how to think more like in-house lawyers, basically, is what a lot of it comes down to.
I think I'll answer this. It says you're both quite entrepreneurial and lots of legal-related ventures. I heard you mention somewhere a fractional general counsel service. Is that service potentially competitive with Select Counsel lawyers? No, and here's why. Although there's overlap, and here's why it's not competitive, because that provides a service for in-house people, and in-house people have a different job. For those amongst you who have been general counsel, I spent a career and Chris spent some time, you know that the job of a general counsel is not to have a ton of specific and deep knowledge and expertise. It is actually to know your organization and to understand where risk is and use legal tools and work with the CFO to use financial tools to mitigate risk and to help the business in terms of the commercial parts of the business, whatever you're selling, for example, services or widgets, be efficient and in that service, and to help bring people in a way that comports with all of the laws and to do compliance. So that is.
And I imagine those in-house lawyers are going to want to pull from the Select Counsel network.
That's exactly what we think.
Exactly.
That's exactly what we think.
And by the way, being a fractional GC in several different companies currently and in the past, I like to pull from smaller, more entrepreneurial firms because they get the job done. And so I think that it can actually, those of you who do hang out a shingle occasionally as an outside GC, I think can actually benefit, because
that's right.
Outside GCs send business to each other.
And that's why I say there's actually overlap. So we don't know you yet, like Andrew knows you, but and different people want different things in their careers over time. But the overlap that I was talking about is, there may be people who want to move into that, job. So good. That's great.
Absolutely. But and that's a good, I came into it in a gradual evolutionary way as I got to know clients really well, and they called on me for beyond my traditional area of expertise. But I want to move on to another question from Julie Scott. By the way, we're at the top of the hour, but we're happy to stay another 15, 20 minutes for those of you who have additional questions.
Chris, I'll just preempt your response. I think we should probably have a separate town hall for steering committee specific.
Absolutely. Anyone who's interested, that way people who aren't interested, I don't think it'll be a huge time commitment, though, as a short version. So I think, but it will be, I think it's one of these things where the more you put in, the more you get out, which is generally true of networking in my experience. And networking at that high level can be particularly effective because we are pulling people that believe in leadership and want to be perceived as
strategic.
Chris, is there a like a counterpart steering committee for in the House that this steering committee can, have larger meetings with at appropriate times?
Yes. Well, actually,
for all of the organizations,
we're going to have a unified steering committee. We already have one for in the House, but we're going to have a unified committee for people that are interested in building these bridges I referred to. It's not going to be,
and that's a separate committee. So there's a steering committee for Select Counsel with just Select Counsel members, and then an even higher level that's going to pull from the various organizations.
Yeah, exactly. But we expect those to be a high degree of overlap too.
Yes.
So, but we're happy to stay if people have additional questions. You guys have been uncharacteristically quiet in terms of the actual verbal questions, which is fine. We're happy to take them on the chat group. But if anybody does want to unmute, if you joined late, and I muted all at the beginning. So if there's anyone who wants to ask a question verbally, we can do that. In fact, let me unmute all in case the people on the phone are chomping at the bit. This might get noisy, but I'm going to. So everybody's unmuted now. If anybody on the phones wants to jump in, this is your chance.
Okay.
Sound of crickets I'm hearing. So that's okay. That could be a good or bad or indifferent. Hopefully not indifferent. So, all right. So I guess we will wrap up. I'm going to give people one last chance on the chat group.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Pleasure to meet everybody.
It's great to meet you all. I want to say one last thing. I'm going to do all
It sounds like Sharon. Sounds like someone might be trying to ask a question.
Oh, wait. No? Okay. Well,
Okay, maybe not.
we're available offline. You have our emails because we sent the introductory email. So let me just say one last thing, which is sort of something that I want to offer personally as the new COO for the organization. And that is, and I do this for the GCs and in the House, I have almost like an open channel where I use a lot of tech hacks, and I use the Calendly app to schedule meetings with GCs from in the House. I'd like to do the same thing for you all. I actually allocate more than 10 hours a week to having those types of conversations. So it's deeply meaningful for me to have person-to-person direct interaction with the members of the House. And I want to extend that to the Select Counsel community because I try to exemplify that sort of networking ideal of bringing people together. So in a future email, I'll provide my Calendly link, and you guys it'll allow you to see into my calendar, book a 45-minute video conference, which I prefer, but you can also connect by phone. But I like to look you in the eye and have you look me in the eye because I think that can be make an online experience more meaningful. So that will be coming as well. And Julie, thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, everybody. Really nice to meet everybody.
Okay.
Hear from us in email.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now. So thanks, everybody.